We're now going to be discussing agile leadership in this digital age. And I promise you, there is no one better to lead us through that than Simon Hayward. So Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm delighted to be here, and I hope you've all had a really interesting and insightful 2 days. So as Stephen says, I'm going to talk about agile leadership and draw on the research that I've been doing with colleagues over the last 10 years. And it's really about how to accelerate some of the changes in your organizations that you've been looking at over the last 2 days in the forum. So as we've heard, the bank of the future will be agile. We know from several studies that it's one of the top priorities for CEOs around the world. With open banking and the explosion of AI, we need to be agile to adapt. And during the pandemic, we have seen the need for agility rise dramatically. But what is agility? It's the ability to change both direction and speed quickly and easily. Think of your favorite sports person, how they move with pace, how they have strength and balance, how they have focused intent, and they seem to have more time than their opponent. This is agility. And many banks are adopting agile ways of working in response to the massive disruption we've heard about at this forum. Many have seen dramatic reductions already. For example, one global bank has seen reduction in time, a 60% reduction in application processing time, 43% reduction in cases that require rework, and 123% increase in new accounts being opened each month. We've also seen how other banks are seeing customer-driven innovations, such as Fatima at ILA, created through innovation and collaboration. So the benefits of agile are real. So what gets in the way? Why is it so difficult to achieve in practice? The main barrier, based on my research and the research of many others, is risk aversion. Many leaders are focused on the 1 to 3 year scorecard, governance, regulation, and these can have a restricting influence on the level of risk these leaders are willing to encourage. Hierarchy also tends to increase risk aversion. Command and control styles of leadership tend to be inconsistent with agile. So we need to replace that with intelligent risk to encourage real innovation. And agile leadership helps to achieve this so that we can accelerate creating the bank of the future. So as senior leaders, what can we do? And what do agile leaders do that's different? Well, the research that we've been doing over many years suggests that there are key areas around learning, disrupting, planning and execution that help make agile work in practice. And agile is a different way to organize work in teams with complete visibility, regular sprints, iterative planning, and lots of customer involvement. So what are the ways in which we can recognize an agile leader when we see one? Well, they tend to encourage 4 behaviors in particular. The first is learning agility, to test and learn to drive constant improvement. So leaders who are agile tend to create a total commitment for themselves and others to learning and developing skills and learning from the experience of testing things with clients and with customers. The second is feeling safe, creating an environment where people feel safe to take personal risk. So agile leaders create a climate of psychological safety, where people feel confident and supported to take intelligent risks, to experiment, and to speak out without fearing the response. The third one, and my particular favorite, is ruthless prioritization, focusing on the few things that matter most. Leaders encourage teams regularly to agree and review a backlog of activities that are in line with the customer vision that they've defined. And together they select the ones that they should focus on and focus ruthlessly on them. And then the fourth one is about devolving decision making, encouraging our teams to decide how to achieve their own goals. So Agile leaders tend to enable teams to feel comfortable with this, to make shared decisions, and to have the information and the tools and the skills needed to do so. I love this quote from Martin at BXDG, and I agree that Agile transformation starts when it's driven from the top, when the organization's leaders, especially the CEO, the board, and the senior leadership team, embrace this, because the scale and complexity of Agile transformation shouldn't be underestimated. So let's look at each of those 4 behaviors in a little bit more detail. The first one, Agile, learning agility, it's key because Agile innovation depends on teams in your organization experimenting and seeking customer feedback regularly, which means that mistakes are inevitable. As leaders, we need to be focused on the learning rather than the blame. And a great example of this is Dyson, where mistakes have been a key ingredient of their huge global success over the last couple of decades. And I'd like to quote Sir James Dyson. He said, "The important thing about innovation is this journey from prototype to prototype. And during that process, you get many failures, of course. And the failure is the starting point, because when something fails, we understand why it fails, and then we start to think of ideas to overcome that failure." The cyclones for my vacuum cleaner took over 5,000 prototypes. That's 5,000 failures before we cracked it. So he says, the moral of the tale is keep on failing, because it works. So as leaders, our role is to encourage this constant learning and experimentation of testing ideas with customers and seeking constant iterative improvement. If we're curious and we're keen to learn from opportunities, we create the environment where others will do the same. The second one was around creating that sense of feeling safe. And if we're going to reduce how long it takes to complete a task by a factor of 10 or even 100, it needs people in our teams to challenge assumptions and accepted wisdom. So we need to create an environment where our people feel really safe to be disruptive in search of the breakthroughs that we need to meet the evolving customer needs that we've been hearing about. We want them to challenge the status quo and to create new ways of delivering services. Now Boeing is an example of a company where this was not the case. Tragically, 2 737 MAX aircraft crashed, killing 346 people within a year due to software failure, allegedly because no one was willing to question authority. Sadly, Lion Air Flight 610 in October 2018 crashed 12 minutes after takeoff from Jakarta Airport. And Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed in March 2019, 6 minutes after takeoff from Addis Ababa Airport. Both flights, at the time of impact, were configured to dive based on the MCAS system that was only fitted on MAX planes to compensate for the tendency of the aircraft to pitch upwards. This was because Boeing had put larger engines on the aircraft and had to move them forward on the wing. And there's growing evidence that the crash is caused because Boeing workers were pushed to over-automate the systems and to maintain an overly ambitious production schedule, and they were fearful of losing their jobs if they raised concerns. So this is a textbook case for how the absence of psychological safety can lead to disastrous results. And as leaders, our role is to create the opposite, the assurance and the reassurance for people that it's okay to challenge, it's okay to ask, it's okay to deliver bad news, because that leads to improvement. And Agile is all about improvement and breakthrough in innovation. So as leaders, we need to show empathy, and we need to create this safe climate where our colleagues feel able to speak up. The third area was about ruthless prioritization. And Agile teams work on the top priorities, get them done quickly and well, and nothing else. They say no to other tasks. They prioritize ruthlessly. Look at Apple, which is hugely successful because it operates on the principle of extreme focus. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, he stripped back the various operating systems and focused on one. He said, we only want one, the one operating system, OS, because we can make that the best. 10 years later, in 2007, when they brought out the iPhone, they made the iPod obsolete because they knew that the iPhone would be a better product. Their ruthless prioritization means that they made big decisions and they followed them through, all based around close contact with customers and thinking ahead to the needs that customers haven't yet anticipated and how to solve them. The fourth area was about devolved decision-making. And a great example is Zara, the retailer, where store teams every week make day-to-day decisions about what stock they're going to hold in their store based on what the customer demand in that location is at that time. And the whole organization, the whole supply chain is geared to support those stores in selling the products that are selling locally in line with customer demand. Now, the teams are well trained, they're well led, and they have great information systems, but the organization is focused on the devolved decision making to keep things as close to the customer as possible. Our responsibility as leaders is to create a climate where agile working can flourish. We need to accept a level of risk that is intelligent rather than controlling. And we need to build a cadre of leaders across our organization that can enable and support agile ways of working. Now, I'd like to finish by asking you to consider a question. Which of the four behaviors we've just described do you think is most helpful for your organization to focus on first to shift your organization towards greater agility? Is it learning agility, feeling safe, ruthless prioritization, or devolved decision-making? Whichever one you choose, I'm confident the result will be a more agile organization, better able to capitalize on the banking changes we've heard about at this conference.